Hey, great. Okay. Emma, over to you. Welcome, everybody.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Evolutionary Conversations. And our conversations are targeted to anyone with a keen interest in to move us all collectively forward. The main purpose is to shift people and organizations into new or alternative ways of being and doing. We truly believe in the achievement of the betterment of humanity. And we say one person, one organization at a time. We host safe spaces for leaders to engage on topical matters. So hello to everyone who joined our conversation today. And let's start. Let me introduce and welcome our first guest, Arvydas Strumskis, who is CEO of Ars Ventures. Arvydas holds in his pocket over 20 years of experience in private equity fund management, as well as in venture capital, startups, and SMEs investment and business development. 8 years of experience in management consulting. Arvydas, would you like to say hi?
Yes, hey. And thank you for making me younger by 10 years, actually 30 years experience.
20 plus, that's what I meant.
20 plus. Cool.
Okay, Sanjay, would you like to introduce Steve?
Welcome, everybody. My name is Sanjay Bana, based out in Johannesburg, and welcome to everybody. And just to maybe, before I introduce Steve, colleagues, this call is literally streamed, I think, of 3 continents at the moment. So we've got Africa, we've got Europe, and we've got a colleague that's joined us from the US and the Americas, I think North and South America. Antonio, please, you'll correct me a little bit later, right? So colleagues, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our second guest or panelist, Steve Teasdale. I've known Steve for probably going on about 20 odd years, I think, maybe a little bit longer, shorter. Got to learn a lot about Steve working together with him at Eskom when he was in the Leadership Academy. And he was one of those people that literally I spent a lot of time just testing my thinking with. He's shifted a lot of my thinking over the years and tested my thinking and also challenged my thinking. And I've truly appreciated that. And in the last, I think, probably 7 years, he's been with Discovery Health, which is one of probably the most disruptive health or medical care businesses in South Africa and growing around the world. He's their Chief People Experience Officer. I'm going to leave him to tell you what that actually means. But needless to say, he's somebody that I value. He's got a huge amount of experience. His thinking is just somebody that's way out there that literally stretches people in terms of their mindsets and their approaches to things. Steve, would you like to say hello?
Hi, everyone. Really, really good to be here today. Looking forward to a great conversation. Thanks.
Thanks, Steve. So back to you, Emma. Thank you.
Thank you. So today we're having a discussion on the topic about our mistaken perception of the world, where Barney is actually reality to check. So how do we truly shatter our 4 illusions of the world? How are leaders navigating Barney? Arvydas, let's start with your experience. Given this disillusionment, what do the investors actually looking for in the companies before investing?
Well, investors normally pretend that we are looking at a business plan, then at Excel sheets and the rest of the things. But then, when it turns out back into our 10,000 years of history, we are looking for people connection. If there is a connection, if there is understanding of each other, then things start evolving. And I have been doing many investments since beginning of our country, basically since 93, 96. It's pretty much similar like it was happening in South Africa. But yeah, I have to admit that we are all living in a world of illusions somehow. Sometimes in our own bubble, in our own illusions. And the real stretch is how to get out of matrix and try to really understand, who we are. So sometimes people move into meditation, which is, I would say, it's a great way of, trying to understand who I am and where I'm coming from. And I was very much inspired by Yuval Noah Harari. This evolution in his book, it's 3 books, 4 actually. But it's where we are coming from. So what I'm suggesting, it's for many companies and many executives, is still surprised that instead of starting doing on strategy, I suggest, well, why don't we have a book and read it on where we are coming from? I think it's terribly important. To understand where we are coming from, since we are facing now, how to say it politely, an alien employee. Sometimes it's called ChatGPT and sometimes it's called something else. But essentially, this is the first time we are dealing with non-human life, which is already in our office. So I think it's timing. Timing is, I don't know. It's very strange timing, I would say. I never expected to live in such a timing when alien is coming to my office. At the same time, you start understanding that this whole work environment is about to change. At the same time, we still have to remain human somehow. So that's sort of in a nutshell. I do believe that many organizations are lost in a sense, and just trying to figure out who we are, where we are coming from, and where we are going. I think, in my understanding today, it's a major shift in humanity way of organizing themselves. I don't know, it's Steve. I was just looking through his LinkedIn. It's massively impressive. Where you are coming from, you have worked really inside organizations. What are your thoughts?
So, I'm kind of fascinated by this generative AI story, but I'm not going to go there because I might get there in the end. But I think that one of the things that I really resonate is this concept: where are you coming from? And I suppose what that means could be different to many of us, but really, who are you? Have you looked at yourself? Have you asked yourself, what is almost your master program, and what over time has kind of taken you away from that? And I think we sometimes get lost on that. Who are you? I think if you asked a lot of people who are you and where you're coming from, you may get a very socially desirable answer to that. One that may help them close that deal, one that may help them build a relationship quicker, a very pleasant and kind of acceptable answer. And I guess what I'm kind of trying to do is to balance that a lot of the time with a more conflicting argument or conflicting, challenging approach. But I like the idea of reading a book or something, because when we read books or we read something, we're all reading the same words, but we may see different things. And I think that is the beauty of the future. And that is through difference, really uncomfortable conversations. So there's so much that you're saying that kind of I resonate with, that I hadn't even thought about before this started. But really, I'm talking about something that's probably operating at a level of consciousness that's already quite advanced if you're going to get there. But really, the hard work on yourself and working with others is, trying to convince that movement around the level of consciousness is the real challenge. And I guess my biggest challenge in some ways is balancing the the journey between self and desired results from an organizational context. And there are different times, and there's times in organizations where it's incredibly in flow. And then there's times in organizations that are very confused, to your point. And I think we're in that time at the moment. And I worry a little that we will not go back into what's your story, where did you come from? And we'll rather jump into what's the problem to be solved here? Let's solve this thing, or let's leverage it, or let's use it, rather than asking these very foundational questions that you raise. So, completely off track from what I thought I was going to say when you started the conversation. So grateful that you've taken me forward in my thinking. But I do worry about where we are. And in a space of misunderstanding, in a space of confusion, I can only assume that in the diversity that comes with many people looking at something, we will probably get closer than ever to a decent stab at solving or using or leveraging for good. And even that statement for good is debatable. So, my definition of good for good is very different for yours, and anyone else's maybe. And I think that's the kind of cool conversations that can emerge if you get people to experience something common, but have very different views on and share those views. So exciting times in business, and exciting times certainly for our organization. I don't know, any questions on that? Anything you want to challenge or pose to me?
So, Steve, I'd like to perhaps just come in there for a second before Arvydas or Omar comes back. So I'm hearing something very, very interesting that you're saying here, and it's something I read some time ago as well. And it's this, they say in order to achieve outwardly, you got to start focusing inward, yeah, and fix inward first in order to create the outward results. And what I'm hearing you say is actually there's two things here on the table. Barney literally challenges everything that we thought. Our perceptions of the world have literally created the chaos that we're in. So what I'm hearing you literally highlight is the fact that not only must organizations begin to go a little bit deeper within, who are we? Have that conversation. But in parallel with that, you're trying to have a conversation with, well, who am I actually dealing with here as a human being, as an employee, or somebody that's a fellow colleague in this organization? And literally getting to the crux of who actually am I? What am I doing here? Where am I coming from? And those conversations actually becoming the crux of how you build an organization that there's no guarantees, but the beginning of how you start to plot a more resilient or build a more resilient organization to navigate your way out of this, as opposed to focusing more on, what am I solving for? What's the objective? What's the key result I'm driving for as a business? You're saying, yeah, I'll get to that, but let's go back. Who are we? Yeah. And maybe perhaps getting down to the individual level. I thought I'll just test that with you quickly.
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, it's an endless game, and I can only say that when you go deep within and challenge yourself, it's a very uncomfortable space. But for organizations to do it, I think is probably the same. And I'm working in a founder-driven organization. This thing is very, very personal. It's deeply rooted. Where did I come from? The same people who started this company 30 years ago can tell you the story, and the question is, was it really like that? What illusions did you have at that point? So to test that and to go deep inside is the answer. But I guess you can always challenge that. Have you gone deep enough? And I think that those people who have tested this discovery route, and I don't mean it in the pun, that the company they work for, this route of discovery, I guess that you find yourself often with more questions and more discomfort. And I think what I've failed to do is to jump into many of those moments of discomfort even further for the efficiency or the probably avoidance of some of that other discomfort. And I can't, and I'm making a resonant point because I'm trying to compare myself to an organization, and I know that they're two different things, but I would imagine an organization having very similar challenges if they dig deeply into what they are and how they actually act versus what they say they act like. I guess it's going to be deeply uncomfortable, and it's going to start to question stuff, and at some point become inconvenient and slow and challenge all sorts of things. And we will slowly move towards a narrative that's more comfortable and more acceptable to shareholders, maybe, or whatever that is. So I'm kind of placing this comparison here and saying almost it's actually not surprising. It's so damn human. And organizations are so damn human that we just, there comes a point where we bail out, and we are compromising greatness, I guess, if we do, but it is just so easy to do and so natural to do. So I don't know, Arvydas, maybe your views on that.
Yeah, one of the reasons, why I started mentioning this, how we evolved as a humanity, and I was just trying to reading some books, Noah Harari and some others, there is one key element why we are better than others, Neanderthals and other chimps. It's because we managed to cooperate. And this, cooperation and this cooperation thing is supposed to be ingrained in our genes. And most likely it is. But what is actually happening, and these studies started basically just 100 years ago, how people are making decisions and how organizations are making decisions. And where is the difference? Why it is that people in a boardroom make lousy decisions while individuals making better decisions? I mean, I'm not talking about dictators. I'm talking about some, you encounter it, and I have been running many board meetings, and I see that crazy, sometimes completely nonsense decisions are made in the board. Well, when everybody out of the board, and they say, "Well, it's a crazy decision. Do you understand it?" I mean, it's obvious, and it seems to me that I'm trying to avoid politics in parliaments, and you see what is happening in parliaments, and all these things, and that is very interesting, how to make organization make better decisions, and how move along these lines, and I'm coming from mathematics originally. I've studied a great deal of game theory, and my favorite was John Nash, who received a Nobel Prize in 70s. I mean, who basically said that cooperation is giving much better economical results than pure Adam Smith competition, and that was a major breakthrough. But that happened only 20 years ago. I mean, seems to me that we are very fresh in understanding our collective behavior. I mean, just look at the wars, and just look at things which were happening in South Africa before Nelson Mandela, and India, and all these things. It's very fresh. It's very new. I think we are in the constant learning curve, and I would say that our understanding of how we act as a collective bodies is absolute embryo. It's just the beginning.
And I mean, it's bizarre to me what you're saying, but I kind of hear it.
Yeah.
I'm hopelessly kind of still believe that collectives can be incredibly effective, and more effective than individuals. I guess the challenge I have with that is that it's like it's an anomaly, unfortunately. And I guess those we've all been in the discussions where an executive team make a really good decision, or a board, as you say, make a really good decision in a meeting, and everyone leaves the meeting saying, what were they talking about? That's crazy. That's just not, and that behavior, the behavior that then sparks from that is always amusing. But I think that if you can get a group of people to a place where they can almost really productively, or maybe the word is reason productively, in a way that's very, very confrontational, but in an incredibly safe space, I think we can have amazing conversations that can solve incredible solutions. I think sometimes what we struggle with is the ability to feel safe enough to challenge something, or to be, and that safety can be your own, often your own challenge, not necessarily the room's challenge. And that safety is not about, I'll lose my job, but sometimes it's about feeling ashamed or embarrassed. And I guess these are human conditions that are just ingrained in us very early on. We really avoid these things like the plague, literally. So if we can get to the point where you take some of that away, you take some of that kind of energy away, and you can almost, my dream is to create spaces that almost in the context of humor get across some of these barriers. You can have an incredible, and I think we've all had it one or two times in our lives, where the conversation is just mind-blowing, and it transcends something, because you just were so in flow, and everyone was contributing, and there was engagement, and that's where you thought the level of the conversation was going to end up, it ended up 10 levels above it. And you kind of deconstruct that conversation. What happened there? And I guess to recreate that magic. But I'm a hopeless romantic in as well. I truly believe we can do it, and we can create an organization that is filled with the majority of people making decisions, thinking in a certain way. So I kind of a little bit different to you, but I do respect the context that you're coming from.
Yeah.
Also,
it looks like, sorry, Irma, just reflect on what Steve said. I consider myself a bit more realist here. I mean, even pessimist. But no, Steve, I've got a secret. And my secret was that which I did a couple of times in my career. Then challenge was great enough, or let's say big enough, I would sign on a consulting assignment and sign consulting. So people needed to make a major breakthrough in a company, and and there were a couple of more guys who also signed a contract. And the contract essence was that we do the job, but we are not getting paid. There is zero fee, and there is zero bonus at the end of the project. So which basically means, we are opening ourselves into free flow and free generation of ideas, and nobody can fire us because there is zero budget on it. And we have succeeded enormously. I mean, we basically transformed the company. They paid somehow later on with a couple of lunches, but it was just a good job. And it absolutely resonates with me what you said. It's a safe is being safe to challenge. So no, since nobody can fire me, so I can do what is really needed. And then we are having people who are fully dependent in the meetings and in organizations who are dependent and nervous that they can be fired. I mean, we are not open. We are trying to be comfortable with what boss says, what is the culture and the history and that kind of stuff. And that also resonates with Finland. For instance, Nordic countries, they seem to be happiest countries in the world. I mean, according to various ratings. And one element which triggers in questionnaires every time, every year when they make reviews is a safety, that these people feel safe in their country. And that's again safety. Somehow, when we ensure that people are safe to fly, they fly.
Yeah.
Sorry,
yeah, I was listening.
Too enthusiastic.
Very good. In the beginning, and actually you spotted the part where basically individual versus community, right, comes in. And I do hear a lot that organizations talk about, building communities, building ecosystems, that community is our, main value. How do you see this part when, we are in the times where we're really trying to restart ourselves, to get deeper, to dig deeper in ourselves? And how does that, rely or balance with that somebody, an organization trying, to fit us in a community where, they do believe that the organization will receive better results there. And I do believe in better results with the community. But don't you think that more than, I would say more than 50% of cases, building communities are at some point artificial part? Do you have any experience here? What do you think on this?
Yeah, I mean,
yes, it is. Steve,
go for
please.
it. You go. Yeah.
I mean, it is artificial. Everything is artificial in the beginning, like clothing. I mean, technically we don't need clothing. I mean, it's not very cold, but when you put some nice clothing, you feel better. And I feel better, with some nice suit, tie, and I mean, it has. So yes, it is artificial, but when it becomes either second nature or you are out. So I don't know. I think people like some kind of stability, some kind of structure, and be able to feel free and enjoy themselves freely within a structure. A structure is not depressing. I mean, there are structures like dictatorships, they are depressing. But some people actually are happy within dictatorship also. So I don't know, I don't think there is an answer black and white. It's a bit grayish. Sorry, Steve, please.
No, I think you've said it very similar to how I would say it, is that to escape artificial. So first of all, let me sort of say, like, I'm so aligned with this, with a company view on creating communities and really kind of reinforcing this issue. It's an incredible struggle because the expectation on us to do it in organizations is huge. But the ones that work the best form naturally. So some kind of problem or some kind of issue brings people together in a way that probably lacks as much diversity as it could, because it's a common problem, but not completely. Whereas I guess when we're trying to force an issue, we really do struggle. We do struggle in that. So it is kind of artificial, and it very seldom succeeds, to be honest. I find it. But to Arvydas's really philosophical view, I'm so aligned, because actually I'm convinced that almost everything is artificial. Like if you said to me, and I had to operate in the world, in a statement like in the world, in a way that exactly I wanted to do, and everyone wanted to do that, I doubt we would end up with organizations in the first place. So, you know, that we have constructed a norm to wear clothes, to have a way of working. And maybe there's a different world out there that doesn't require working or doesn't require organizations. I don't know. You know, in a future parallel universe, I don't know. So, but I can assure you that I can't see us naturally gravitating towards this. If we pressed reset now, what would happen? Like, what would we do? You reset, but you keep your level of consciousness. What happens? Like, so I'm almost suggesting in that statement that it is an inferior level of consciousness that got us to where we are now. But we are operating at a slightly different level of consciousness now. I'm not sure we would create the same thing. So I'm not saying it wouldn't be still artificial, but maybe less artificial.
Thank you, Steve. Sanjay?
You know, I want to read something that Andrew posted in the Q&A on the side, and perhaps just build onto that with what you just said, Steve and Arvydas. He says, I agree the collective can make better decisions. Reality is, though, while organizations espouse creative thinking, the culture to large extent unconsciously pushes towards conformity, hence the possibility of groupthink. So if you think about that statement that Andrew's just made, and the conversation that you just had now around, you know, communities form naturally, you know, and, you know, but hey, it all starts off artificial. If you put all of that together and you say, well, okay, now hold on, what sort of a world am I dealing with here? What are the issues that I'm dealing with? You know, on the one side there's groupthink, and then there's the collective making better decisions. On the other side, you've got individuals making better decisions. Then there's this other little story that says, but guys, you know, it's all artificial, but hold on, you know, communities form naturally. So if you look at all of this, you know, if you look at a typical leader that's sitting in any business, be it a startup, be it a large corporate or a mid-sized company, how do they look at all of this? And on top of that, we're talking about, you know, people don't truly bring of themselves unless it's a safe environment. So, you know, the question that's sitting at the back of my mind is, well, all of this is going on right now, but what's the essence of this? How do I make this space safe? How do I make this space safe for whoever comes in here to contribute, to participate, and collectively, you know, just create those opportunities for us to discuss, debate, and move forward. But without those, what shall we call it? Arvydas had a nice description to it earlier on. He was talking about, you know, working in a company or contracting to a company with absolutely zero gain on it. You know, how do you create that space? You know, where people can actually come into an area, work safely, but they've got no attachment. Yeah, they've got no attachment to the results, or, you know, something of that sort. I don't know if that's coming across clearly, but it just, you know, it boils down to that question for me of just, so how do you create safe spaces? Yeah, I don't know what the answer is, but I think, you know, I'd like to just maybe have that conversation that says, how do we create those safe spaces, you know? Yeah, let me leave it at that. Yep.
Yeah, there are many ways to create safe spaces. I mean, I would say it starts with leadership. I was reading great deal of books, and especially those of organizational decision making, maybe simply how people make decisions in groups and individuals and so on. And I mean, there are methods and methodologies. How do you do that? Robert Giardini, Kahneman. I mean, you can find the various ways. And when I talk about leadership, and I'm just trying to, how to say, formulate it. when a leader or group leader is able to see every individual and try to get, how to say, best out of him, it's enough safety in that. So no, instead of dealing with in a meeting with a group of people, start dealing with a group of individuals. I mean, it makes a lot safer for everyone. Just try to express himself. What I'm trying to do, some times ago, I have figured out that, we in early stage companies, it's called technically startups, we are dealing with every time iterations, new ideas. And we have to get out these new ideas of people. How? Because there are some people who talk every time, and they've got a whole bunch of ideas. And there are people who are sitting in a corner, silently observing what the hell is happening, and they're silent all the time. And then what we have to do, we have to get ideas out of these people. And then, I mean, statistically, these quiet people have better ideas than loud people. And yeah, and then what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to organize coffee breaks and meetings and talk individually and come back. It's often gather, come back, gather, come back, gather, come back. And by that, I'm not saying we are extracting most of it, but 50% is already very good. And and it's that. So I would summarize my long, not well articulated speech into respect individual within a group, and you will bring a lot of safety to people, a lot.
Yeah, I mean, there is a bit of resonance there for me in that. I guess much like world peace, the answer is sort of if you had everyone who had a willingness to let go of their egos and a willingness to kind of be completely open to what was coming into that conversation. But perhaps I wanted to think about when you were talking, I was thinking, what are the things that stop safety? Maybe it's easier to kind of look at it that way. What are the things? So I think that we sometimes have a fear of particularly high-performing people, a fear of being seen to not be high-performing still. And the shame that can come with that is, that this is there. So how do you deal with that particular person's challenge in that context of creating safety? There could be a very systemic issue such as race in that conversation. You have to deal with that issue. There could be a fear of time. I think time sometimes bothers me. Often my lack of safety is mostly because I don't have enough time to solve the problem. I don't have or to dialogue it. And we find I'm sure you guys have been in similar things where you go into, you've got a very, very big decision to make and a very kind of momentous and quite systemic challenge to pose to a group of executives who have to make a decision on something. But the meeting's running over. You've got 10 minutes. Can we just solve this quickly? Can you just give us the 3 big points? Can you show us the 2 slides? Like that, I think that's where I feel very unsafe. And so time is a massive issue for me. I think in the context of organizations, we often don't create safety through time to solve that problem. So that's a very personal challenge of mine. But all I'm trying to suggest is that the solution to safety, there's generic stuff and there's books on it, as you say, and they're fantastic and they really do talk to how you can generically create safety. But the personalization to deal with my challenge and why I feel unsafe when I'm introverted or how do you make an extrovert feel safe? And that's maybe a safe feeling extrovert is somebody who's keeping quiet. so, and listening more. So we're all different. And I think that the skill of facilitation and the skill of extraction, to your point, what you're doing in that coffee break, what you kind of encouraging something and moving, that's the skill. That's how you create it. It's a facilitated kind of technique. And I'm sure we've also been all on leadership breakaways. And the first half a day is horrendous. We kind of have a fairly decent afternoon of intellectual conversation. Overnight, we have some good drinks together. We start to share, and we have a lot of kind of a little bit more open sharing. And then just before you leave, you're having these incredibly honest, meaningful conversations. And that is a factor of facilitation. Yeah. And that facilitation is not only human, but it's designed. And it's not hugely complex, I don't think. But, we need to create the space for everyone. The problem is that it takes time. That's sort of my view on this issue. Yeah, I'm not sure I answered Andrew's question, however. So we moved on from Andrew's question, but I guess he'll make us pay for that at another stage.
Steve, I can only share my experience how to when time becomes tough and one has got only 10 minutes to make a decision. I was lucky to play a role of shareholder in several situations. So what I did, I said, well, I'm going to make this decision. There is not enough time left, and we all understand that there are no perfect decisions, and most likely all our decisions are wrong at this moment. So I'm taking this decision, and then you can blame me, shoot me, whatever. You cannot fire me, I'm shareholder. The worst thing we can go bankrupt, and it's again on my. So when it comes to leadership, I would say that in such a tough situations, there has to be one guy who is able to do that, and just take responsibility on his shoulders, and basically, well, the worst situation what can happen? He's getting killed. Well, whatever, business-wise. And that's it. So I did that. A lot of tension, a lot of rumors, a lot of hate, but the company survived. Ultimately, everybody was getting bonuses and so on. And yeah, it's from a game theory. It's called dictator rule. So you just make decision, understanding that most likely is wrong.
I mean, that's an interesting one. Something happened to me the other day in a similar situation, and a complex issue, and time was short. But the CEO said to me, we have to make a decision. We haven't got enough time. So I said, I don't think we should make the decision. He said, we have to make the decision. But what I really want to do, and I will make that decision. We're not going to debate here, but there's one thing. You're the expert. What would you do? And so if you're going to say anything, what are you going to do? And I thought that was profound. And not that he agreed with me and he didn't make the same decision as I suggested. But the point is he asked. And I think sometimes they don't. And so, there's this great saying that you argue like you're right and listen like you're wrong. And that really is profound to me. And that's almost what he enabled in that discussion. He allowed me to give an argument, listened, and he made his own decision. But at the end of the day, he gave me a chance, because I've been working on this thing for months. I'm so invested in this thing, I won't feel safe for that individual for a while. It'll be if he didn't allow me to talk. So kudos to him for doing that.
So I'd like to perhaps, Amma, before you come in, let's then we've got about 40 minutes remaining. I'd like to then perhaps just go into or lean into Andrew's comment. I think it's more of a comment then a question. I'm going to try this answer live. I don't know if it comes up, but it says, it's more a statement. He says, I agree, the collective can make better decisions. Reality is though, while organizations espouse creative thinking, the culture to large extent unconsciously pushes towards conformity, hence the possibility of groupthink. And I think it was just a statement to make just to get some conversation going. I don't know if Andrew's still on the call. I know he needed to leave early.
100% aligned. I mean, I couldn't agree more. It's that word reality, the reality that really is the truth. And so I guess that's why I suppose I'm a hopeless romantic in the space, is that I believe that I think I've been there before. I think I've been part of things that have been magical before. Why can't I do it again? Why can't I work to create that moment again? I know that 9 times out of 10 it won't happen, but I will get a chance again, I guarantee you, and I'll keep fighting for that thing.
Wow. Thanks, Arvydas.
Yeah, I don't know. I sort of agree what Steve says. We all are romantics. We all want to do things. But what I would more inclined into trying to understand and understand individual more in a group. I mean, coming from individual into group instead of going from a group into individual. It goes back and forth. But yeah, I think it's a massively complex thing in the sense that every situation is very much different, and you have to deal with people of various races, various religions, of women and senior people and younger people and that kind of stuff. So I think we are coming to understanding that we are all different. And different people forming different groups act in different ways, and that's a sort of it's a bit of fluidity, and it's I understand it's a bit tribe thinking. I mean, every tribe is different, but at the same time we see what is happening on a Facebook. There are so many tribes, all kind of angles tribes, and I think that is I would call it individuality prevailing over group, despite the fact that only cooperation made us humans.
So perhaps just maybe leading into that, maybe you can borrow this. So if conformity and groupthink is literally, let's call it the bane of business today, yeah? What do we do to prevent that? Or how do we prevent people from going down that rabbit hole? So there's some things we could do. Because
it's a religion.
Is it something worth tackling? Is it something worth addressing or breaking? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of things. What made us humans is a religion, beliefs in gods. I mean, it's beliefs in stories. I mean, we are coming out of stories, and that kind of when corporate creates such a story inside it. And and then there is a part of conformity. We are happy with the story of organization. Then the rest we can leave to individual discoveries. Yeah, I was working for several years. I mean, more than 7 years at Capgemini, and I was going through. I mean, they have had an office in Johannesburg, and I've got a friend there, Franz Maritz, and we worked with him in Paris. And Capgemini have had such a story, a little bit like religious organizations. So we believed in greatness of organization, but organization believed in our greatness too, and that was sort of just fantastic feeling being part of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one thing that hasn't entered the conversation is context. and context matters. So I guess we've seen it. If I kind of extract the narrative around religion and those sorts of things, context has forced churches and religions to adapt, some of them at least, to more relevant contexts. But it's a painful journey, and it's always too late. And so I guess the best organizations will not get trapped in the story that doesn't match the context. And they will move to a space of learning quicker. So they will spend time not fighting, not in defensiveness. And they will step into the space of learning and discomfort. And I think those are the organizations that kind of pivot quickly, not in the short term, but really in the long term. And they get that head start. I mean, they've got more runway by the time others are even vaguely near. And I think that's and I'm talking about it like I can do it next Tuesday. You can't. I mean, it's hard. But I think that's the trick for organizations, is to stay very connected to context. And the one thing that I struggle with a lot is being open enough to the context. I can be very open in one way and very closed in another way. And to assess a context is a struggle for me. And I would suggest to assess a context, you really need diversity. And I guess then we in this vicious spiral again of sort of almost being in this space where we don't allow enough because we don't have enough time, or we don't give enough safety, or whatever it is. So I kind of draw the whole loop back together. But I guess if we get to the point where we are kind of questioning our own thinking, question our thinking about our thinking, if that makes any sense. I don't know if it makes sense. Then we might, and I mean I'm talking about our organization. Like, that context is different now. What is our thinking correct? Or do we, if to talk to this, to sort of in very much Andrew's language, how do we step into that double loop learning in this world that we're in? So I think it's hard enough to do it as an individual. Think about it collectively, how hard that is. But it's also easier. The hardness is that reality that Andrew's raised. The easier is the closer you get to an individual, probably the easier it is to make the decisions, to Arvydas's point. So it's a fascinating challenge. That tension emerges for us all the time. So maybe this context thing is something we need to spend more time on. How do you read a context? How do you integrate a context into a situation? How do you think about your context against another context, a future context? It's fascinating stuff that I'm probably not intelligent enough to process, but rather just to say the words.
It's what you're saying. It has been, how to say, proven by life that we have faced, our country have faced migration since 1990s when the liberations from Russians started, and many people, including not so good people, not so polite people, and not so friendly people, left our country, and they have moved into various West European countries, including England. And what is interesting, that many of these people, within a new environment, within a new context, they became different people. It's not like they are breathing different air, but they became more polite. They started working. despite the fact we have been lazy the whole time, and they are coming back as wealthy individuals with nice behavior, families, and so on. And we are observing it. And I've read somewhere that if you want to really to make a change in a company, first what you need to do, move into new office, change environment, change context. And it's why many mergers and acquisitions fail, because when you start integrating them, it's a new context and they cannot live in that environment.
Yeah.
So true. And we have one more. We have few actually questions and comments, and I see that we have a question from Antonio. On the point of leadership mentioned by Arvydas, to what extent can we place any hope that a movement towards purpose-driven organization will actually deliver better societal results? Can we prevent purpose washing?
No, we can't. It's a journey. It's a constant journey for us. I mean, we are traveling people. It's our journey. So just think about what we are really talking now. It's a real new phenomenon, like a new financial system, credit cards. Do you remember when credit cards started? Actually, it's around 70s. It's many instruments we are working with now are very fresh within our lifetime. So till 1948, people were living totally different lifestyle than we are living now. So this, as Steve said, this context, I mean, is giving us new problems and new solutions, and it's a journey. We just started. I would say it just started.
Antonio, maybe very specific to your question. So I would suggest that purpose washing is a fact of desirability or social desirability. You kind of have to put this thing out because your investors almost need to demand that you got a point on this thing. I mean, the head of BlackRock put out a few years ago that unless you got a purpose, we're not really interested in you. Like now, you can see hundreds of executives scrambling around trying to find a purpose. It's like so demanded. So naturally, purpose washing is going to play out, and marketing geniuses will kick in around this stuff. So that I don't think we're going to avoid it. But I think a movement towards a purpose-driven organization is one which that creates societal benefits. For me, sits in the concept of shared value. So if you've got something which is good for customers, good for the organization, and good for society, then you've got kind of a hidden incentive for everyone to kind of move towards their certain purpose. So that is the kind of genius that sits in this world of ours, is to find opportunities to create shared value. And I think, to the point made by Arvydas early on, we are all kind of created to coexist and to engage and to exchange and share, and all these things. I think that if we get to a point where, imagine we were thinking like that as human beings about most things, the decisions we made, it would be a very different world. I mean, I think we are in a polarized state, certainly in South Africa, where we are so all protecting something. And if we carry on like that, we will never get to a point of shared value, because we don't fundamentally want to share. So I guess it's this human instinct, and the neuroscientists are very clear on this. We ultimately are protecting ourselves. It's ingrained. It's like basic caveman stuff. And And so that's the interesting piece here, Antonio, for me is purpose-driven organizations will only be successful if it's filled with purpose-driven people. And how do you make purpose-driven people? Well, the first thing, you've got to help them find their purpose. So, and that's like, that's a gift of life that many people don't get. And so one of the things which I'm extremely passionate about, because of the context, and the context catches me, is I have to build a mechanism that is scalable for people to find their purpose. And I don't know what it is. I don't know how it looks, and it's a battle I've had for years and years and years. But I can't help but think technology can help me somewhere. But I also think that I'm naive to the difficulty to it. So if we can get it, and do you need to understand that purpose fully, or just enough to explore and explore and explore and explore? So it's a great question, but I can't help but think that it will be sustainable. Any organization will be sustainable until it's filled with people who are living their purpose into their organizational purpose. And that means that organizational purpose better be very, very compelling. And people who they want to do something because it's very much aligned with what they're doing. So, and then you can challenge capitalism and all those good things that the private equity friends on the call, leverage. But it's such an interesting question, and bigger than, for me, this is the challenge. One day I hope that I have this opportunity to test and play with a scalable purpose finder solution.
Well, in a way, church has at least partially solved the problem.
Yeah. I suggest it comes with other problems. But
Yeah.
So Steve, let me maybe lean into that, and I'll maybe give some personal experience. I've actually run over the past 18 months, probably about 14 workshops focused on purpose discovery. And I can tell you this much, every time I ran it, we learn something completely new. Just when you think, okay, well, you've got it down, okay, and then you get to a point like, okay, hold on here for a sec, but we should be going this way. So I think, my experience with it has just been, and to answer your question earlier on, do you need to understand it fully or just enough? What I've personally experienced and found is that if you understand it just enough, but what's just enough? Just enough to take action, just enough to commit for a specific time period. And I mean, truly commit, you can move forward. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but just enough so you can put a commitment down to what you need to do for a specific time. Yeah. But it's not a short time. It's not 2 hours, 2 weeks. It's a commitment. I'm going to do this for 90 days. I'm going to do this for 3 months, 6 months, a year. But it's a commitment related back to that purpose, which is sizable enough and relatable to the point where I can definitely implement this thing and give it a real honest shot. Yeah. So that's the one thing my own experiences. And on the other one, scaling it, I think there's lots of methods one could use to discover one's purpose. And it goes back to context. I'll give you 2 completely different examples of something that just now in January we picked up. Ran a workshop, and the one individual's purpose turned out to be very, very flashy car, flashy home, money in the bank. That's what they're driven by. Nothing wrong with it. But if you understand the person's context and the background that they come from, makes perfect sense. Yeah. Because they've come from lots of lack, lots of scarcity. Yeah. Versus another person in the same workshop was talking about, literally impacting the lives of people, in a positive manner. Yeah. Very much plowing into people, got nothing to do with life. If they could spend 24 hours a day, 365 days of the year, just plowing into people's lives, that would literally make them happy. So, once again, context matters in terms of both of those. But I'll stop there. I want to then perhaps go over onto Ajay's question, and he says, drawing on the analogy of clothing brought up earlier, I think we and organizations or subgroups within the organization like to clothe ourselves in various progressive sounding or trending discourses and project a certain exteriority. But we enact in the day-to-day practice the embedded institutional patterns that maintain the status quo and keep us within our lanes, and hides our conflicted realities and pressure to conform that is masked by the shiny exterior. So, you know, I'd love to hear your views on that, because this is, yeah, it's loaded. Yeah, go
Yeah.
over to you guys. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's true. But I mean, coming back to this analogy on clothing, you know, when I put my running shoes, I start walking at least faster. I mean, it inspires me, like, you know, putting on a nice suit, you know. I mean, it is, in a way, I think that, you know, it's organizational change, and it starts with some kind of, you know, with, yeah, it is artificial and so on, but if it suits and if it's comfortable for action we are going, I mean, it's perfectly fine. It's very difficult to run marathon in derbies or Oxford shoes, but, you know, yeah, it is. Many things we start with so-called artificial thing. Ultimately, they turned out to be comfortable and useful, and we like them. Yeah. I don't think it's anything wrong with that.
So,
Yes.
so yeah, I mean, I guess you're spot on, AJ. It's not, in my view at least, like it is a reality. I guess the question we might want to ask is, for what purpose are we doing these things? What's the intent? And if you're in a kind of a journey towards something that's positive and helpful and all those good things, what's the quickest way to get us there is often removing the friction, and that friction, and in this context, the friction of embarrassment, the friction of sort of having to go through a number of different difficult paths to get to an outcome. Sometimes is and that outcome's not dissimilar to what you want anyway. It's quite a natural thing to do that. I think what we do in that process, however, rob ourselves of, is learning. So there's and you know, I can say that the vast majority of the work that we do in you know, organizational change and organizational development effectiveness is exactly as you're talking to it. Yeah, we almost saying staying, you know, I'm not suggesting it's any different. What I'm saying is imagine a world when it's not. And this is the challenge. It's so damn easy to go down that path that we just consistently do it, but we're not going to exponentially change either. And we're not going to exponentially be able to do something in a context that we're not prepared for. So we're robbing ourselves of learning, perhaps. And I'm not suggesting it's every time, because there's realities in business. We have to, you know, we have to generate whatever output we want, and whether that's profit or social change or whatever it is, that stuff has to happen. If it's not happening, something else is going to change. So, you know, I think we have to be, and I think this is the art of management and leadership, is kind of being able to reconcile some of those dilemmas. But, you know, I wouldn't suggest that. I'm not sitting here saying this is not exactly what we do.
Thank you, Steve. We have another question from Andrew. And I remember in the beginning, Stevie was saying about AI. So that's the question. Is AI going to worsen the already under threat trust relationships necessary for safe work contexts.
Yeah, I mean, my gut feel is yes. Because we need to. I can't help but think that some of the people that are commenting on this and the need for control and the need for regulation and there's something saying that there's danger. I don't quite understand it. But there are people quitting roles and that are very, very advanced in this space because they're just so uncomfortable about what it will do to the world and the ethics of it. And even though I saw the UK government talking about creating a control around it somehow, responsible or ethical controls, like that kind of either it's going to propel us into a space that maybe doesn't require those people who are defending the status quo. So maybe that's why they're doing it. I don't know. But my general gut feel is that it's gonna create a very messy world, and we've seen it with very simple AI in the context of social media. You know how it's generated polarization and trust between people and generated incredible movements of people towards something that's not real. So I guess we are in some ways, while it's an incredibly advanced thing, we are limited by the narrowness of the minds that created them. So I don't know, but I got my gut feel is that it's really gonna challenge us in the workplace. I don't claim to understand it yet, but I'm terrified and excited.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's a massive amount of excitement, but at the same time, AI, which we are facing right now, it still has got the brains of mice, but it is evolving. I mean, the thing is that people, we need to eat sometimes, we need to sleep sometimes, so we're effectively working like 10 to 12 hours a day. AI is working all the time. So I mean, it's growing much faster than we do, which basically means that we don't know the moment when what is growing and what it will happen. Is that Cinderella or Tyrannosaurus Rex? And this animal have to be befriended. I mean, we have to start dealing with him, and this unknown is a massive problem for us. And for governments and but now what we see now, I saw just a couple of days, I saw a perfectly normal man talking but it was avatar, it was no robot. I know the interaction was almost normal. And it's, as I started in the beginning, I mean, it looks like alien is coming and it's completely unknown where it migrates, where it evolves. So I would say that scares us, and me probably. At the same time, it's, if we befriend it, I mean, it's massive. I mean, it's opening totally new horizons for us to live and work. And many people are scared that we are losing jobs. Sure, we will lose a job if we are not learning, if we are not adapting. But by the way, if you just look at the number of horses in the world, since Ford factory started in the last century, the number of horses continued growing. And so first hypothesis that number of horses will disappear was not true, despite the number of cars are growing. So it's an exciting period, but we have to keep learning. I mean, we have to keep adapting.
Maybe it's the solution to my scalable purpose challenge. I don't know.
You never know.
So thank you for that, colleagues. We've got about 10 minutes remaining. And I think I just posted, I see Antonio's posted a nice little PDF there in terms of BCD research. So for those of you guys on the call, have a look at the chat. There's a lovely document. Thank you, Antonio, on
Okay.
the BCD research on AI. And then there's a comment from Ajay. But before I go to the comment, I want to perhaps just lean into this conversation as well. I'm not sure if all of you guys, but I know some of you may have attended the recent launch of Exponential Organizations version 2, the book, with Salim Ismail and Peter Diamandis. And there was a little quote there that they mentioned. And Peter said it quite nicely. He says, don't be worried about AI. He says, that's not the real threat. He says, it's AI plus your competitor that's your real threat in terms of the work you do and the job that you do. Because AI by itself is really, it's driven by a human being. And it's the human being that works together with it, that essentially that leveraging effect that one's going to be really concerned about. It's because what do they create together? Because it's always driven by somebody. And I think that's probably the one point. Steve, I see your hand. But the second,
Go for it. Carry on.
And the second part, I think I just, you're talking about, why, the question that came to my mind is we're talking about AI, the fears around it. The question I have is like, why do we want to control? Why do we feel the need to control? What is it that we're truly afraid of? What is that fear that literally stems from whenever something new comes to market? I also have it. I think everybody does. But the question is, what is that actual fear? Is it the fear of humanity being wiped out? What is that actual fear? Steve, sorry, back to you. Thanks.
So, I mean, I just challenge the notion that it's AI and your competitor. I think it could be AI and a bored teenager. And that's what terrifies me. Like, it's just random. Like, and who knows what it is. So I'm terrified of the power, it's an exponential power. And I think that's what worries me. But I guess the if I'm honest, it's the fear of the unknown. It's the fear of whatever. And I, what ultimately is that fear is that, am I relevant in that world? Can I do the things that give me purpose still? And so if you take that, like that is the fear, and then ultimately death. So, these are, for me, if I'm honest about these things, that's where I'm going with this thing. It's like, and actually it's fairly human. It's fairly consistent fear of self-interest and self-protection, like very primal stuff, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. Arvydas?
Yeah. Yes. Sanjay, can you confirm that you are not Avatar?
What do you want me to do? Pour water over my head? Do something completely, I don't know.
That's the thing.
What's the
That's
word?
the thing.
Out of normal? Yeah.
That's the thing. When IE becomes a little bit more creative, we might have difficulties to understand with whom we are dealing. Really, I mean, you cannot touch me, you cannot smell me. I mean, I'm Avatar, and I can start translating absolutely fantastic things for your organization, and basically building new religion inside the organization, which is managed by IE, and that's it. And I'm always online. I mean, that's a problem, really. And how to deal with it when with such a virtual Superman is coming and having answers to all your questions, worries. Plus, if you want some food, it can quickly deliver to you. So it makes you happy. I'm not sure about some sensual activities, but I've heard we are coming too. And that's an issue. But it's how to deal with such an animal. Is that an animal at all?
So, I mean, it's fascinating this, because I'm thinking back to my point about what are the organizations that will be quick enough to respond to this stuff. It won't be the ones who've developed a competence in groupthink. They will absorb that AI and that religion or whatever it is very quickly. It's those that have developed the competence to enter discomfort and challenge and and to kind of tear an idea apart, despite its popularity, that will probably thrive in that world, or not be taken advantage of by that world. So, you know, I guess the context is that we may need to find a new way of interrogating AI. To, you know, are you real, Sanjay? I don't know, but it's the best question I've heard tonight. It is brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Sanjay, just a last word, you know, in my opinion, how to manage and how to survive is don't be scared of it. Just don't be scared. Learn, understand, interrogate, interact, but don't be scared. Fear will kill us, like 10,000 years ago in the battle with Neanderthals.
I will add here, and I totally agree with Steve, with you and Arvydas, that I think it's so human that we always care of everything we can't control. And I think it's so human to control everything. We are really into that. A part of that, we, you know, talking about collective decisions and communities and individuals, but still we want to control things all around. I know that the United Nations are preparing the code of conduct, which will help act, or let's say use the AI. It's like code of ethics. But it also, you know, it's so dynamic, it changes so quickly that probably this code of conduct, which started, I think they started preparing like 2 or 3 years ago or so, or even more, that it's already out of, you know, it's not applicable probably.
Yeah,
so
and now it will be also
that's my thoughts on AI. And another thing which my personal view and what I'm afraid with the AI coming and getting bigger brains than mouses have, is that we'll lose our creativity. And I think that's really the engine of, you know, which really moves us forward. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Irma. So colleagues, with that, I'd like to bring our conversation today to a close with just 3 things. Firstly, you know, I could not have summarized today's conversation better than Arvydas's last few words. So how do you deal with Barney, or how do you cope in the world of Barney? I just love his statement. He says, you learn, you understand, you interrogate, and you don't be scared. I don't think there's a better way to just summarize today's conversation other than those 4 words. And I want to add something that Steve said earlier on. He says, purpose-driven organizations will only become successful if they're filled with purpose-driven people. Yeah. And literally, it's about literally creating shared value. And I think that's probably a nice crux point there as well. Just so, how do you survive? How do you thrive in Barney? Well, you know, learn, understand, interrogate, and don't be scared. But also build out something that's purpose-driven and fill it with purpose-driven people. And the goal at the end of the day, yes, shareholder value, but shared value, you know, something in it for everybody. Yeah. And then the other point I want to just highlight that came out today was just, and I like I'll go back to the comment Arvydas made, and I think it's something we're all going to ponder on, is how do I prove that I'm real? Yeah. You know, Barney is all about our perceptions, and the fact that our perceptions have literally brought us to the cliff and may even push us over the cliff. And I think it's having those conversations of, how do I actually prove I'm real? You know, the first thought that came to my mind is, well, I'm fault. I've got lots of faults, you know, I make mistakes, I trip over myself, you know, but I think it's an important statement, because in a world where everybody thrives and looks for perfection, you know, what's real is the fact that human beings are imperfect by nature, by design. And that is what makes us perfect, the fact that we're imperfect. Yeah. So what I'd like to do is just, as we close off, three things. One, firstly, Ajay had a nice comment there at the end. He says, with regards to the earlier comment around clothing, he says, agree, Steve, I was trying to differentiate taking up discourses as the wearing of different styles of clothes when convenient from the real work that gets to shared purpose, which also requires taking up clothing. I think the hard work is to create new spaces and contexts to shift the underlying patterns and allow for new ways of wearing ourselves, to continue the clothing analogy, and to experiment with new ways of being and doing. I think we need to interrogate the duality of natural and artificial. Yeah. Antonio also had a comment that says, unfortunately, we still do not have a societal contract to make us safe to face or adopt AI. And Andrew's comment was, I think we should fear the youth with AI who are deeply disillusioned with a world that they do not resonate with. I think some very interesting parting comments. So what I'd like to do just to close off today is I'd like to just share my screen quickly. Give me 1 second and let me know if you can see it. Just to end off today, I'd like to first by saying thank you to our conversations, to our panelists, Steve and to Arvydas, for literally coming and sharing your thinking, your ways of viewing the world and your perspectives. We truly appreciate it. Thank you to everybody that's actually come onto the call and engaged in some of the Q&A and participated in it, and also to those that will listen to this on YouTube and view this on YouTube. Also like to say thank you to, actually before I say thank you, our conversations, evolutionary conversations, are literally conversations like Irma said earlier on, to move us collectively forward. The more we know, the less we realize we actually know. And I think today was a great point just demonstrating that. And our focus literally with these conversations is to shift people and organizations into new alternate ways of thinking, being, and doing. And we hope that we've accomplished that for you and with you. And creating spaces for thought leadership and ideas to collide for the betterment of all. None of our conversations are scripted. They're all free flow, and wherever they go, they go. And that's the magic of this. There's no end state. The conversation flows. So thank you also to our communications partner, CloudSoul, who's been so really great at sponsoring this facility for us to use in terms of Zoom and online gathering. They've sponsored all of our posts to date. Thank you so much to them. If you want to chat to us further around shifting ways of thinking, being, doing, Irma and my contact details are on the screen at the moment. I'll put a little YouTube link in the chat as well for those that want to follow us on the YouTube link. Today's video should be uploaded onto YouTube probably by about midnight tonight, depending on how long it takes to convert this, but it will be there. I'm just putting that in the chat. So for those of you guys that want to literally watch the video later or share the video, there will be something on, there is something then in the chat you could use to connect on. Before closing, I'd just like everybody to turn on their video for a second so we can take a group photo for tonight. And then I'll give everybody just to say a parting word, but let me first take the group photo. I'm going to stop the recording. There we go. You show you how to stop recording.